Hi friends, Windy City Peach back with another cooking video for you. What I wanted to do today is share a recipe with you guys for homemade biscuits. Yes, homemade buttermilk biscuits. And I know you may be thinking this is way over my skill level, but I really believe that the video that I'm going to share with you today is going to be something that anybody can do. Anybody can do. So I'm going to break every single step down, even down to the texture, to show you that you too can make buttermilk biscuits. It is really important that you use white lily flour. Okay guys, now that we have the flour, of course, out of the way, you're going to use 2 cups of flour, just so you know. Then it's going to be 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. It has to be cold, plus 2 tablespoons to melt, 1 to 1.5 cups of buttermilk or whole milk. First, you want to measure out your flour. It's really important in this recipe to layer your ingredients. So I always pre-measure out the baking soda and the baking powder just so I'm not confused. And from there, I add in both cups of flour. Then I start to add in the baking soda. I take the time to use a whisk to actually add in the baking soda to the flour. You'll notice the texture start to change. Then I add in the baking powder. I again use the whisk to mix it up. From there, I add the salt. And again, you'll notice that all of the dry ingredients are getting mixed up. You don't want to just dump things all in at once. You want to take your time and put each item in individually. Now that the dry ingredients are in, I take the 6 tablespoons of butter and I use the pastry cutter to cut the butter into the mixture. You'll notice that the texture of the biscuit starts to change and the butter has to be really, really cold. It'll even start sticking to the pastry cutter, but you can pull it out and you just use that time to mix in the butter to the flour. The flour mixture will start to get crumbly, and that is actually a really good thing. Now the flour mixture is very crumbly, and that is the perfect texture that you're looking for. Then from there, I create almost a hole in my mixture, and I'll explain that as you see the process. And so I pour the very cold buttermilk, so your buttermilk should also be cold, and from there I add in the buttermilk into the little hole that I've created, and so that allows me to mix the mixture from the outside in. And so I make sure that I concentrate the pouring of the milk into the center of the mixture, and I add a little bit of flour, and it's going to start to be really moist at this point, and you want to stir your flour into the milk mixture from the outside in. Once the flour and the milk is all mixed in, you will then add your other 1/2 cup or cup. With whole milk, you might want to add more or less, but you'll notice that the texture of the biscuit is starting to change and it's becoming very, very moist, and that is actually a wonderful thing. It gets really sticky, almost like glue, and that is the texture that you're looking for. But remember, you're going to be stirring it all from the outside in. I wanted to take this time to point out that at this point, the flour and milk is perfectly mixed together. You want to make sure that it's not a soupy mixture, that it's not overly with milk, not under flour. So if you find the texture off, add one or the other to counterbalance the difference. Now, I usually use a cookie sheet for this part of the process. I take about a half a cup of flour, and then I take my biscuit mixture and put it right in the middle of that flour. It's going to be almost like a little wet mixture there and outside of the dry mixture. And you'll see that there's a difference, but I'm going to mix them and you can scrape the bowl. Then I kind of pat the mixture together, and from there I get my biscuit cutters, and you'll understand why in a second. I take the mixture and I began to fold it into the flours. So I fold it in different layers. Don't overwork it. You add a little bit of flour, create almost like a perfect square. And at this point, I want you to see what the dome looks like. So I'll tell you guys, what I usually do is use the same size biscuit cutter, but I wanted to just show you the different sizes of biscuits that come from using the individual biscuit cutter. And so I use the biggest one in this case. So you'll see that the size of those biscuits, and then they actually go down. There are actually 5 different sizes of biscuits that come in that particular biscuit cutter. Then you're going to mix your mixture all over again, making sure not to overwork it. And if it's necessary, you can refold it to create those layers in your biscuit when it bakes up. And then from there, I continue to use different size cutters and rinse and repeat. Now, I know somebody's going to be watching this video and say, well, my grandmother doesn't even use a biscuit cutter. She just uses her hand. And so I wanted to show you guys what you can do without a biscuit cutter. You can just use the mixture yourself and just create a biscuit from it. You do not have to use a biscuit cutter at all. That's just the method that I prefer to use. But you can also just use it and press it together yourself and create like a little ball and then press it flat. 10 to 12 minutes later, you have biscuits, and oh my goodness, they smell amazing.